Hey everyone, welcome to the Authority Hacker podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing some of my best prompts for Chat GPT, the kind of prompts that you've probably seen nowhere else before, because I use Chat GPT a little bit differently than most people. Most people are kind of like a one-hit wonder where they just put one prompt, get the answer, and they're done. I like to use the iterative process of the chat to get very refined answers from the AI, and I'll show you exactly how you can do this in this episode. Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to the Authority Hacker podcast. I'm your host, Gerald Breton. If you are new to the podcast, we are a podcast where we talk about online marketing, building niche and authority sites. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about using Chat GPT for SEO, affiliate marketing related tasks, etc. So if you're interested in these kind of topics, don't forget to hit subscribe. We're going to be covering these topics a lot more in the coming months, so really you don't want to miss that. You can listen to this podcast on all the podcasting platforms. So wherever you're getting your podcast, look for the Authority Hacker podcast. But if you're just listening to the audio, you can get all the notes and the screenshots on authorityhacker.com/podcast. So you can go and get it later and then you'll get everything. As is tradition in this show, I'm going to be first asking to Mark and not to ChatGPT. How is it going?
As is tradition, Mark does not have an answer. However, Mark went to Chat GPT to ask for some answers, but it was down. It said it was too busy, so it couldn't get an answer. So the world really is, getting together in order to not provide an answer to that fabled question. How's it going? So
I think that's a sign. But yeah, it's true that ChatGPT has been down like quite often. It's quite annoying. I can't wait for the paid version, so that it's like finally they can dedicate resources to people who pay money, and then you don't have to worry.
It's like it reminds me of whenever you go on a plane and they have free Wi-Fi. It's always terrible because everybody's using it. But as soon as they charge $2 for it, then no one wants to do that, and so it's actually usable.
Yeah. So filtering by money, I think. I mean, it's gonna happen. They've already been doing like poll on Twitter. I've actually filled an early Google form to OpenAI to like be one of the first paid users or something. I've been using it quite a bit. I use it for a lot of like small things. And we're going to be showing you that basically right now. Let's just jump into this. We're going to do the first part of this podcast where I'm going to show you a bunch of prompts that I've been using, how I use it. And I think it's going to be a little bit different from what you may have seen from other places, because I like to use ChatGPT iteratively. So the problem with a lot of people, the way that a lot of people are using AI is they treat it as like a one-hit wonder where you ask one short thing and then you just get an article or get whatever, and people get amazed by that. But you could do this with GPT-3 before. It wasn't as good, but the real revolution of this is that you can have iterative and implementations of improving the data they give you through the chat system, because you're like,
oh, I like what you gave me, but please change this a bit, etc.
And that, in my opinion, is the real value of this new format and how good it is. Obviously, it's not perfect. If you go in the technicality of that, basically you get 4,000 tokens per query. A token, to give you a really rough idea, is about 3 to 4 character generated, something like this. But the thing is, like, you use tokens both for your prompt, so what you input in it that it needs to analyze, and the result. So you have a credit of 4,000 tokens for both. So if you put a long prompt, then you can get a short answer. If you put a short prompt, you can get a long answer. You get the idea, right? So it's not perfect, because I really feel like using one of the first computers ever in the world, because like I feel like I run out of memory because I want to give like big data for it to analyze and things like that, and I can't, because it just can't read the whole thing and take all of it into context to give its answer, for example.
And is that something that's likely to be solved as soon as they start charging for it? They'll just let you go as much as you want.
I mean, yes and no, because the paid API for OpenAI, the GPT-3 one, is also limited to around this. And that's actually why I get the limit, because ChatGPT would not tell you that, but it works the same way, like behind the scenes. It's just a computing problem. The problem that I think there is that I don't think it scales linearly, the difficulty. I think it scales exponentially, because it's like you need to put in context every single word to every other word in there. Well, a small query costs you maybe like $0.1. Like a query that's 5 times longer might cost you 100 times more because of the amount of calculations that are needed for this. So it's like, my question is like, how much is that going to cost if they increase the limits, and how much could you be ending up spending in AI if you were feeding it like a huge data set? I don't want to go too deep into this, but you can actually train your own model with it, with the API. But then it's pretty large scale. You need to feed it at least 200 pieces, so most people would not do that. Anyway, all of this to say, that the magic of this is the iteration. So let's just jump into the first prompt. The first idea was like, okay, how do I brainstorm long-tail content ideas? Let's say I am the content manager, or like I'm running a site in a niche that I don't know very well. I want to write about topics that are like maybe less prominent in Ahrefs keyword tools or whatever. Like, and I took the example of paintball in the screenshots that you will see. So, I run a website about paintball. What are some sub niches I should be tackling with my content? Give me the results as a table with sub niche and a number between 1 and 100 to indicate the sub niche popularity, right? So then I was like, okay, like tell me how is this popular, and give me some broad categories that I should be tackling on my site first. And again, that's not my keywords, but that's the first iteration, because what I do as well is I provide context to the AI with its own answer. Like, that's pretty much what I'm doing.
Do you have any idea as to how it actually is determining the popularity level? What might it be using for that?
Like frequency of encountering the terms in related documents it has in its database, for example, something like that. Or it just makes it up. That's quite possible as well. Because AI is pretty notorious for just making stuff up, right? But if you look at the answer, it says, here's a table with sub-niches related to paintball, estimated popularity level, that's to 1 of 100. And then, some examples are tournament and competitive play, popularity level 80, equipment reviews and recommendation, popularity 75, tips and strategies for beginners, popularity 70, etc., right? It keeps going through this. But it says at the end, please note these popularity levels are an estimation. It can vary based on the location, target audience of your website. It's basically a disclaimer from Chat GPT telling you, I'm not really sure yet. But still, it's interesting.
I mean, it's still good as a prompt if you don't know all these kind of different corners of the paintball space, then it's going to give you something to go on at least.
Exactly. So that's all I wanted for this prompt, right? I didn't want an idea for content. And then what I did is like the next prompt is I said, expand this list as much as you can. I keep going up until like very, very niche topics like, paintball for military and law enforcement training, or like paintball photography and videography, or paintball rules and regulations, like the very, very low topics. But still, like it starts giving me ideas of like where I can dig. Like, oh, really? They're using paintballs in the military to train. Which makes sense, actually. Like, it makes a lot of sense because you can see where you shot people, so you can analyze how good of a shooter they were. That was interesting, and that was just my first prompt. Then I was like, okay, take the sub-niche types of paintball games, which is one of them that it gave me, and brainstorm a list of articles based on popular search terms and long-term variations that are likely to be easy to rank on Google. This is gonna try its best guess. It's as if I was asking you without Ahrefs, just get an idea. Present the result as a table with a column for the proposed article title, another one for the target keyword, and a third one for popularity level for the keyword between 1 and 100. So then it came up with like 10 most popular paintball games, and then target keyword popular paintball games. Beginner's guide to different types of paintball game. I would agree that it's probably the same keyword if I was doing SEO. But then it got interesting one. Scenario versus speedball, understanding the difference. And I was like, I don't know what is scenario or speedball, paintball. Like, that made me think about this. The rise of Woods Ball, what makes it unique? What is Woods Ball? I have no idea, even though we've been talking about paintball all the time. MagFed paintball, a growing trend. What is MagFed paintball? I have no idea. The evolution. So you get the idea. Like, it gave me a bunch of types of games that I had no idea about, that then started essentially giving me seed keyword ideas, right? It's like, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I could be digging into that. And then after that, I just did another prompt that says, update this table to include as many types of paintball games known as possible. And the reason I did that is because I was like, oh, there's really a lot of things here of like types of paintball games. And actually, if you Google it, it's not all listed in a nice way. Like, it seems like people kind of like preach their own church more than cover everything. So it's like, this was a nice summary, and I got a bunch. I got like hyperball paintball, pump paintball, milsim paintball, stock class paintball, etc. Like a lot of stuff, basically. So that was pretty interesting. And then basically I started just checking these keywords on Google, and I was like, okay, what is speedball paintball? And then literally like the number 2 result for speedball paintball, which is a search volume 900, was a DR18 site that gets 176 search traffic according to Ahrefs, which is pretty good. Like, usually you get quite a bit more for these long tail keywords. So that gave me like a keyword I would never have come up with. Or Woods Ball paintball, for example, was a DR6 rank. There was a DR6 ranking with 95 search traffic. So this gave me a bunch of ideas that not only would help me be seen as a better site on paintball, because if I don't know the niche, it's like I would never think about these topics. So like you could argue topical authority, all that stuff, but also it gave me a bunch of like long tail ideas that would not necessarily have come up very easily if I just put paintballs in Ahrefs, right? So that's kind of like my first use for it. I like to like brainstorm like it's my brainstorm partner, you know?
Yeah, and you know, you've described this as brainstorming long tail content ideas, but it's actually much more than that. It's like your seed keyword research in a way, almost. It's like
yeah. Well, you're looking for a starting point, you know?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and it's quite good for that. And I think there was no keyword tool that would do that very well before. I think this does it better. And so like I think you can come up with fresh content ideas for undercover topics quite easily here, and we're using it for that for sure. I have another example of that actually. But I did it differently, so it's going to be a different one. So the first thing I went for horse riding because, you know, when we said niches, for 2023 we said horse riding was a good one. So I started with like, give me technical terms related to horse riding. It gave me a bunch of, I've done horse riding when I was a kid, but I don't know them in English actually. So that was interesting. So it gave me a bunch of stuff, you know, like gallop, trot, walk, bridle, beat, crop, gait, canter lead. Canter lead is like the real long one, I think. Dressage, show jumping, eventing, equitation. I have no idea what these are, but apparently they're important. And then basically based on that, I just started putting dressage in Ahrefs. Like I was like, oh, okay, that's an interesting subcategory of horse riding, and it's not necessarily prominent when you put horse riding in Ahrefs, right? And again, I found a bunch of like super easy keywords based on this. So like how a dressage horse is trained, for example, the number one site was DR46 site, the second site was DR25, the third site was DR30, the fourth site was DR28. These are like pretty low and they get decent traffic. So I was like, yep, this is pretty good. Another keyword I found from this is how much does dressage horse cost? Again, like, you know, it's the DR7 ranking number one, there's a DR3 on the page, etc. And they will get like decent traffic for long tail, basically. And how to measure a dressage saddle. So it's like, you see how I took Chat GPT, I got ideas, and then I went back to the traditional SEO tools to verify the data. And the problem that we see with a lot of people using Chat GPT is they get really excited by it, and then we'll ask Chat GPT to like come up with the final keyword. But the problem is ChatGPT does not have live keyword data feeds like Ahrefs has or something like this, right? It's trained on a set database that is never updated anymore. Like it was trained in 2021, and even though it might have some data for keywords, which I'm not sure it does, I think it just makes it up. And you see a lot of tutorials on like, oh, look, it just finds all the keywords for you and it just makes up the volume. And I took some keywords they gave me with volume and I compared them with the real data and it was completely off, basically. So you need to be a little bit careful, but like using it as a starting point, like to find a starting point for your keyword tools, that is like a really, really good use. And you can do it through two different ways that I just showed you now, basically. So I would recommend to do that.
And that's kind of the general theme with ChatGPT and AI in general. It's like it's not going to do all of your work for you in a single press of a button, but you can use it as an assistant to, in many cases like this, get started with things or do small parts of the task. But you still kind of have to retain overall, I guess, editorial view of like what's going on, and you're kind of like making sure that nothing dodgy slips through.
That's the problem, right? It's like because it answers, a lot of people get really excited by this and they're like, oh my God, it's going to replace everything, all the jobs, etc. But when you actually start digging into the facts that it gives you, when you start digging into the numbers, if it gives you numbers,
because the way it presents it sounds so confident about it. So you naturally want to believe it, right?
Yeah, but I think people are being a bit fooled by this. And also people are playing the clickbait on YouTube, etc. I'm like, oh my God, it can do everything. You can make thousands of dollars with this.
The companies who have, commercial AI tools, they're also, they know where the limits are, but they're kind of letting people interpret their marketing in such a way that, yes, this is a one button does everything for you tool, when it's not really.
Yeah. I mean, if this is as good as your work's probably not very good. Let me just say that. Like that's pretty much my opinion. It's not. If you go and fact check, if you go and read the numbers, it's not so good. But like conceptually, like it understands language so well that, for example, like for keyword research is very interesting because it has that depth of understanding of like related keywords, long tail technical stuff, etc., which a keyword tool is not good at surfacing, for example. And that's a really, really interesting use. And good keyword researchers will be using this to start brainstorming stuff, but then they'll plug back into traditional SEO keyword tools that are plugged into, the Google API that gives them the actual search data, like real world usage in live, not from 3 years ago or something like this. The way these AIs work right now, even though if they had search volume built in, it's not updated. It's not quality data anymore. And the more time passes, the worse it gets. So if you're using it 6 months from now, the test set is even older, etc. So I would not recommend. And let's jump on to the next one, right? The next one is on summarizing content. And this one was quite interesting, right? So I actually took, I took the example of like me writing an article, but I'm out of my depth, right? It's like it was an article on like taurine in dog food. I wanted to like quote veterinarian sources and like real research, etc. The problem is like, I don't know if you've ever been onto one of these kind of like medical sites, etc. But it's unreadable. I have no idea what they're talking about.
You need to be a vet
right?
to understand what's going on.
Yeah, like I have no idea what it's about. So what I did is I actually pasted an entire. It was an excerpt of like a research on like the effect of like how much taurine there is in dog food based on how it's prepared. And so I pasted this whole thing that is unreadable for me, and then I basically said, summarize it for me in plain English, basically. And I started chatting about the article because it remembers. So it makes the summary. And you can ask questions about it. So for example, my first question was like, does the study talk about the effects of taurine on dog health? And it's like, the study does not specifically address effects of taurine on dog health. It focuses on taurine content in various animal feed ingredients and the influence of cooking on taurine ingredients. And I was like, okay, what's the main factor that lead to an increase in taurine in food, for example? And they were like, well, the main factor that led to that, the use of animal muscle tissue, particularly marine, which contains high taurine concentration. Plant products, on the other hand, contain undetectable amounts of taurine. So basically, if you have more animal protein, it works better. And I was like, so is taurine concentration mostly a matter of protein source used in the food? It's like, yep, it depends on the taurine content of the protein source used in the food. Animal muscle tissue contain high taurine concentration, whereas plant products use a low detectable amount, therefore using animal sources. And so you see the idea. I'm basically getting my conclusion in plain English as if I was talking to a vet, right? My idea was like, okay, you know this. You understand this information. Now let me ask you, like when I go to the vet with my dog and I'm just asking questions, right? And you can do that. And so it's very, very interesting because you can go much deeper into your quotes for like, put real science back into this, but real science that maybe was not reachable to you. It now can reach it, summarize it for you, and then actually make it so that you understand it. And then you can quote it whether it makes sense in your content. And I think that's one of the rare cases where you find AI actually augmenting content in a positive way, in a sense that actually you'll be relying on more reliable facts because you use it to help you, understand everything, basically. So like,
I think this is kind of why they called it Chat GPT, right? Because you can interact with it, and you don't just treat it like put an input, get one output, and then ask it another thing. It's like it's a conversation almost.
And you see how like all my things are like not one prompt and then get the answer, but rather a process, And I think the real value, people who are going to be really good at this AI stuff, they're going to be building essentially, paths that they take the AI to. Because again, as I said, as the AI answers my questions, it also builds context for itself to answer the next questions. And so the way AI works is it reads everything that was above, and then it just uses that. So it's like if I pasted the original article, it will use the original article, we'll make a summary. Then I ask a question, it will use the original article and its summary and my previous questions. And you keep going, basically, until you run out of tokens. That's the problem. But you get the idea. And so one trick, actually, when you run out, quite often, if I do a really long chat, it will run out of tokens. It will basically forget the beginning of the chat. So quite often, if I feel like this is going to happen, I ask it to summarize everything we talked about in one prompt so that it can go back to its summary to give its next answers. You know what I mean? I'd be like, okay, write a 25 bullet point summary of everything we've just talked about in the chat so far. And then I keep going with my questions because it can then keep using the key facts to actually give relevant answers. So it's like, it's a hack to extend your memory, which hopefully won't be needed if they increase the memory at some point. But as I said, it's not that simple.
And if it goes the wrong direction, you can correct it as well. You can say like, no, that's not what I mean. Do this.
Not even that. You can do that, but it's even better. There's an edit button for your prompt, so you can go back up and rewrite it. And I think it's better to try to keep your discussion going always one way, because again, because of the token limit, if you start having back and forth fixing stuff, You will see some examples where I have this, but like if you're really clean about this and if you want the best quality information, you need to kind of go back and fix your prompt rather, so that you have the information condensed in less words, and it's more likely that it's going to use more context for your next answers. So yeah, that's pretty much the better way. Sometimes you know you're gonna finish before, so it's not that big of a deal, but sometimes it's worth it. Let's jump on to the next one. So the next one, I think a lot of people are gonna enjoy: outreaching for link building. Shotgun has been a thing for a long time, where a lot of people basically send more or less the same message to a lot of people. I think now with AI we can send customized messages at scale. And I think that's the next step. And I'm very surprised very few people have talked about this. But I'll give you an example of like a rather manual process, but you could imagine some other uses of this with APIs, etc. Right? So I say, come up with angles for authorityhacker.com to guest post on epicgardening.com. I wanted to tease Kevin a little bit. It did that, actually. It did it surprisingly well. The ideas were good. Like how to use SEO to drive traffic to your gardening blog, the role of content marketing in building successful gardening business, how to use keyword research to identify profitable gardening niche, the power of backlinking. So it's like it understood at least that we're trying to cross gardening and online marketing. And the ideas are like fair, The benefits of starting a gardening podcast. I don't know if it knows we both have a podcast as well, but if it does, it's pretty cool actually. So I was like, okay, cool. Then include these ideas in a pitch email from Gail at authorityhacker to Kevin at Epic Gardening, right? It did a pretty standard, a bit boring email, like, hi Kevin, my name is Gail Broughton and I run Authority Hacker, a blog that teaches people how to build profitable online businesses. I'm reaching out to you today because I'm interested in writing a guest post for Epic Gardening blog. I've been a fan of your blog for a while now. I'm really impressed with the quality of content you produce. I believe that my experience and knowledge of online marketing combined with my passion for gardening make me uniquely qualified to write a guest post on your blog. Basically, the moment where you
pretty cookie cutter stuff. Like if you're to make a template,
say, that's when I hit
it would
the spam button,
probably be, something similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few ideas. He gave the ideas, and it's like, oh, I'm confident this get post will be well received by your audience and provide valuable insights. Yeah, that's when I like throw up in my mouth a little bit.
I mean, it's not a terrible message, right? It's very generic.
Yep, I agree. So I was like, okay, this is generic. So my next prompt was like, replace the second paragraph with a personal story of how my apartment in Budapest became a jungle because of Kevin's TikTok videos, right? And so like it took that template and changed just the second paragraph and changed it to, I have to admit, I wasn't always into gardening, but I stumbled upon your TikTok videos, and before I knew it, my small apartment in Budapest was turning into a jungle. Your passion for gardening is contagious, and I've really enjoyed learning from you and trying out the new techniques in my own space. And then it kind of kept going. I was like, okay, now it's a little bit more interesting. It's still very boring. But the problem is like, I know Kevin very well. If I send him this email, he'd be like, bro, what the fuck? And so I was like, no. Rewrite this in a more casual way. Kevin is a close friend. And then it went like, hey Kev, what's up man? It's Gail from Authority Hacker. I just wanted to reach out to see if you'd be interested in writing a guest post on your blog. I've been a fan of your content for a while. Then I did kind of like the TikTok videos. Anyway, here's a few ideas. Let me know if you're interested and we can discuss the details further. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to contribute to your report. Basically, the tone was a lot closer to what I would expect, but my problem is the ideas were not so good, right? The ideas he put in there was like how to use SEO to drive traffic to your gardening blog, the role of content marketing in building successful gardening business, etc. Like this is okay, but like Kevin's audience, like what's the percentage of people who have a blog, Not that many. So it's like, it's not, he'd be like, man, it's like, I can't post this, I was like, okay, that's okay, but change the content ideas to be about gardening for entrepreneurs rather than marketing for gardeners. And that's when I was like, that's why I would tell like a junior marketing assistant or something in the company, right? And it changed the ideas to be so much better. It was like how to use gardening as a way to reduce stress and increase productivity as an entrepreneur. The benefits of incorporating gardening into your daily routine as a business owner. How to use gardening to network, to connect with other entrepreneurs. I don't know how you do that. The role of gardening to promoting healthy work-life balance, etc. But the idea is like this was key because together with then the story about TikTok and how I did gardening, then the pitch started making sense basically. But you see how we went from like a boilerplate, very boring email to something that's actually halfway decent to send to people. And so like, again, iterations, right? You need to keep iterating on this. And I think if I was a link builder, I would always have a Chat GPT tab open for these kind of emails actually, and then feed it more data.
I really like it's just little things like how it wrote your signature almost exactly as you write your signature in real life.
I was like, what the
And then when you asked it to be more casual, instead of saying best regards, it says like cheers as the last word. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, so it's like it's useful. Like you can save time here, which is quite good. Okay, for the more hardcore SEO people, like technical SEO people or on-page people here, another thing that it can do decently well, even though it might make some of this stuff up, so be a little bit careful, is find search entities missing from your content. Essentially like subtopics and people and brands, things like that are mentioned in content that ranks very well for a keyword. Well, you yourself are not ranking so well. It can help you identify these things quite quickly. So the first thing I did is I pasted a huge article in there. It was about American Bully dog food or something. And basically it did a summary quickly. Sometimes when you just paste content, it doesn't necessarily take the last line with your comment. So it's better to put your comment in the first line actually. But basically I was like, okay, make a list of knowledge graph entities in this article. And it just made me a list, right? It just made me a bullet list. So there was like origin, American journey, peas, carrots, blueberries, salmon oil, flaxseed, basically a bunch of topics that were talked about, probiotics, etc., etc. Then I pasted another article and I was like, what knowledge graphs are missing from this article that were in a previous one? And so it found the knowledge graph entities in the last article I pasted. I just looked at the ones that were missing and gave me a list of things like omega-3 fatty acids, sweet potatoes, probiotics, freeze-dried liver, etc., etc. So it can help you kind of like do this quick analysis of like, oh, you should probably be mentioning these topics because the number one result is ranking. That is ranking is also mentioning these topics. And so that is quite interesting as well. You make it analyze things for you. And that saves a lot of time. And I can save you some subscriptions. I'm pretty sure some tools are doing this actually. I guess it's like a poor man's Surfer SEO maybe.
Would you run it though in addition to Surfer? Because is this likely to pull out different recommendations?
Surfer's better, right? Surfer's better because it goes and get the rankings directly. It's more like, it's live, like, and also like it has more memory. Like now we might be running out of memory. It might not actually analyze the first part of the article because I ran out of credits, tokens, not credits, sorry. So that's the problem. It's like, it's kind of good, but it's like if the article is more than like 3,000 words, then I think it's going to be complicated to actually make it work because the token limits. I will still use Surfer, but for like short content or doing things like that, yeah, it can help you analyze what's missing in your content in a quick way at least, and then you can dig deeper for these things basically. And you can look, like usually it gives me a list and then I would go back to the number one article and I kind of like try to understand in what context these things are mentioned and update my content. So yeah, that's still useful. Another thing that I like to use it for is to work on briefing content. Not writing, briefing content. And so I went like a little bit different in how I do this. So sure, it's cool to do content that ranks on Google, but I also like to make content that actually helps people with what they're searching for. And so I went for like barrel racing because that was one of the keywords we find in the horse riding example. And so I started with the first query of like, what are some questions a first-time barrel racing rider may want to ask? And it's like, it gave me 10 questions. Some of them are, what equipment do I need for barrel racing? How do I safely and effectively run a barrel racing pattern? I don't even know what a barrel racing pattern is, but when I checked it out, it actually is a thing. How can I learn and practice barrel racing techniques? How can I find local barrel racing events to participate in, etc., etc. So it found me a bunch of questions, which again, this is excellent context before you start briefing an article, right? Then after that, I was like, okay, what search entities and subtopics should I mention if I want to write a beginner's guide to barrels racing? Give me results in a table with the concept, a short description, and a score between 1 and 100 to indicate its popularity. It did that again. So it said like equipment, training, rules and regulation, patterns and techniques, safety, finding events, improvement, common mistakes. And again, you can see, if you read back the questions, you can see it used that as context. It helped it. And I was like, okay, now write me a very detailed markup article outline with H2s, H3s, and bullet points explaining the precise points to make for the article Beginner's Guide to Barrel Racing. Make sure to include very specific information only a seasoned barrel racer would know and all the entities and subtopics mentioned above. So I was like, okay, take all the stuff we did before and now make an article outline. So again, now it has context, you know. And it did pretty well. It didn't do H2, H3s that well. So if you look at it, for this, I would recommend you go check the notes on autohacker.com/podcast, where I'll try to describe it as best as possible. But basically did an introduction. It's like introduce the topic, mention the purpose of the guide, Then first section was equipment, outline essential equipment, and it was like saddles, bridles, and protective gear. And under each one, there is a bunch of bullet points. For example, for saddles, there is explain different types of saddle and the specific use for barrel racing, mention the importance of proper fit for both horse and rider, etc. So it's okay. It's not like the most outlines details still. Like you could probably go a level deeper, but I made it basically do the whole outline, and I did the whole outline, and it's still a pretty decent starting point. And then I would take it over and kind of like add my own stuff, do some research based on these things, etc. But it's decent to start. Like, would you use this as a starting point?
Yeah. So, I mean, as Wang has said, the use case of this is really if you're someone who has a team of writers and has just been giving them, here's a keyword, go write about it type thing. And maybe you haven't gotten that good performance from the results, then actually briefing your content, taking the time to do that will improve that. But obviously it takes a lot of time to make that briefing yourself. So I think this is a way to, if you're producing a lot of content, do that at scale while, not spending too much time on it.
Yeah, and it's, again, you need to add to it. Like some stuff is very generic in the bullet points, and you need to, like, even though I said like be a seasoned writer, etc.
Wouldn't a good writer not just make that generic and like be able to at least work with that? It's like you're giving them step 1 and the writer has to do steps 2 to 10 themselves.
Exactly.
But
instead of an empty page, they start with this.
A start, yeah.
Exactly, and this is based on like questions and like subtopics that are popular, etc. So it's kind of useful. But like the problem is like a lot of people take this and they're like, okay, I'm done outlining, and it's like, no, you're not done. It's still missing a lot of stuff. You still need, like, I would go and research each subsection a little bit more and like look for facts, for quotes, for things like that, and then it's a decent article. But you save the first hour and a half or something by doing these few prompts, so that's very useful still. Let's talk about the next one, which I called fixing copy while retaining facts. So we all know that, and we've talked about this, that facts, it just makes it up quite often, right? And that's a problem. So I took actually a pretty poorly written section on a blog post on Authority Hacker that needs to be updated. That is the fastest WordPress theme blog post. So I took a passage that says, why does team speed even matter? So it has like a bunch of stuff here. Here it's going to be interesting because I'm introducing the idea of variables. So if you code stuff, right, it's like you create variables, or if you do an equation, right? An equation is just variable. It's like x plus y, x is this and y is this, and they replace. So you can do something similar when you write queries for AI, and it allows you to be more to write better instructions, because I can write the instruction on one side with variables and then I can define the variables after. So let me just show you the example. I took the poorly written section and I took a really good written section on the Ahrefs blog by Joshua Hardwick, who I think is like a really good writer in our industry. And I said, rewrite passage 1 to read and feel like passage 2 while keeping the same information. Passage 1, I pick our section. And so there's information in there, like if you pick the wrong theme, you won't get good performances, etc., right? And then passage 2 is just for the style, right? It's just like it was about statistics in link building or something. So I took this passage, and then essentially what Chat GPT did is it took my first passage and rewrote it to feel like the second passage. But I used these variables for that, and it was much better. I read the original one and I read the updated one. So the first one was why does team speed even matter? Some folks are so eager to get their site online that their choice of theme often comes down to whatever is easier to use or whatever they can afford at that point of time, which is usually a free theme. A free email address is fine, but using a free WordPress theme can be a terrible idea. But type of poor decision can lead to equally poor performance for the site. So that gives you an idea. These were short sentences, a little bit too chatty, I feel like. And then the updated version was why is team speed important? Some people prioritize getting their site up and running quickly, leading to a section of a theme based on the on ease of use or cost. This often results in a free theme. However, using a free theme can have negative consequences on the performances of your site. Basically, you can see it's a little bit more strict in the way it's written. It's following the style, the editorial style of Ahrefs instead, for example. So I'm able to just update my content by looking at my competitors and using these variables. And it can be useful to like re-edit stuff, basically. So I like it. The next one is actually quite similar. I put it like writing a section's first draft, but most importantly, to do it without the AI making stuff up. Because the problem is when you let AI just free write is it just makes stuff up. Fact checking this takes as much time as just writing the content yourself. Therefore, it's not that valuable, even though people are so amazed by it because it reads nicely, you know? So my query was like, write a section about picking the right WordPress theme that reads and feels similar to passage example and uses facts as arguments. So passage samples is in quotes, and that's my first variable, and use facts that in quote as well as a variable as arguments. Feel free to shuffle the order of facts. I mentioned again my variable to make sure the article is more engaging and easy to read. Also it said, make sure to break the long text in bullet points, short sentences, and other pattern breakers, which it didn't do, and you will see what. And I define facts. I put facts column, and I put many users pick WordPress theme that on their looks rather than technically sound they are. 72% of websites use a theme framework that is inefficient and prevents them from achieving core web vitals. John Mueller, search relation team lead at Google, came on record saying that avoid free WordPress themes. Basically, I made that up, by the way. Like, it's not true. He didn't say that. There's many ways to change your site look. You don't need to rely on your theme for it. The best WordPress themes are Generate, Praise, Cadence, and Astra. It's often worth paying for a WordPress theme, and it can the best deals can be had on Black Friday. So see, I feed the facts. I'm like, okay, this needs to be in there. And then sample, I gave again Joshua's section, right? And it wrote an article that reads not exactly like Josh's stuff because it didn't break up very well in bullet points, etc., but feels a bit similar while retaining all the facts and not making any stuff up, right? So it says like, you know, when it comes to picking the right WordPress theme, many users tend to focus on the look and of the theme rather than how technically sound it is. This can lead to problems down the road, especially when it comes to achieving good core web vital scores. In fact, a whopping 72 of websites use a theme framework that is inefficient and prevents them from achieving good scores. So you can see there is that, and after that it quotes John Mueller, and it does all of this basically.
How much of this would you use as is, and how much would need to be kind of edited or tweaked? Because it's not bad. It's not bad. If you saw that on some blogs, you'd be like, okay, you know, that's okay.
It's good, but where the Ahrefs section is better, the sample is that it's broken down. You see the sentence length and bullet points vary more, and here it was very similar. It was like 5 lines, 3 lines, 3 lines, 4 lines. Like it's just like a bit monotonous in the way it's written. So, for example, there is the section where it says the best WordPress themes are General Praise, Cadence, and Astra. Like I would put a bullet list here or something. Like I would start editing this a bit. And kind of like break it down, like change, like make it a bit more engaging. Like I think it still lacks a little bit of engagement. Maybe with a bit different prompts, I would get something like that. But yeah, if you feed a lot, but like you see how much input I put, like my prompt is longer than the output, you know? And obviously it's longer because there's a copy pasted sample as well. But like it's not, I didn't just say write an article on what is the best WordPress theme. I fed it all the facts and I fed it everything. And then, yeah, like the more effort you put in your prompt, the less effort you need to put in editing, obviously. And that's what people don't get. They just want to put very short prompts. And that's why you get something that's not too good. Personally, I'm actually studying a lot like the Mid-Journey stuff, like it's the image AI, because they're like, people are so much more organized than people who use Chat GPT, to be honest. And so the concepts are very similar, except it's even more technical on Midjourney. But it's, yeah, the prompts are very important and they need to be very detailed, like very good prompt engineers, because that's the thing now. Write like very, very long prompts with lots and lots and lots of data to get an output that doesn't need to be worked on too much.
I think that's a good point, because you kind of have to do that when you're creating an image from scratch, because there's not really any rules to follow. Whereas at least with written words, it knows that, okay, these are the words, these are the letters, these are what sentences are, these are what paragraphs are. So, you know, you're more likely to get something that follows that framework, but you literally have no framework when you're starting with an image.
Yeah, you can say like what lens the photo needs to be taken with, the style of the artist. You can say the technologies you use. Like if you're using like ray tracing or whatever, like you need to specify the level of details. You can put colors in there as well, like which colors should be where, etc. Like, and so you need to be very precise if you want an output that otherwise you just put like a girl smelling a flower. It just like comes up with random shit, and it's not very good quite often. I think there's the biggest misconception with AI is that people imagine they will need to know nothing, and that's not the case. You actually need to know more, because the people who can feed the best, most precise information to AI are the people who are going to get the best results and add value with their work. Whereas people who just write a very basic prompt, this has literally no value. Everyone can do this. So I wouldn't pay for that. But someone who can write very, very good prompts and get really good output out of AI, I would pay for that. You need to have the background knowledge of what to ask. And if you don't have that, you're not gonna do really quality work with this. I think like you're gonna go on base level, you're gonna make a video on YouTube and wow people. People are wild about this at the beginning with like, oh, it's writing stuff, etc. But in real life, in real production, like now it's just defining what is the bottom level of content that's acceptable on the internet.
But isn't that the case, just to push back on that, isn't that the case anyway if you're dealing with human designers or human writers? Like you still need to prompt and give them the correct prompts.
It's the same.
I think people just typically struggle to articulate what's wrong or like how to make something more engaging. And when you're relying on humans who have that innate creativity, you kind of pass the buck to them and hope that they're good enough to do it. Whereas the AI doesn't really have that. So you have to be very specific, and being forced to be very specific leads a lot of people to realize that they actually don't know exactly what they want, and therefore that's why they're not getting
it's hard.
the quality of stuff they need.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people don't even see that, and it's a big problem. And it's like that's why I don't think AI is replacing anyone at this point. It's like there's just going to be good people at using AI and bad people at using AI. The same way as like when Excel came out, like some people actually learned it and could do amazing things with it, and some other people, they just know how to add two numbers, and then it's not very valuable, you know? So we're a little bit in that situation here where there's massive productivity gains to be had, but you're going to have to learn the tool the same way you had to learn Excel if you wanted to learn it at the time. And it's a process. It's like getting your head and understanding what you can expect from the AI. It takes a long time, and even like I'm just still discovering it. I'm spending an hour a day in the evening just trying stuff. But I'm pretty happy. Like, I mean, we're getting to a point where we're getting stuff that's like almost ready for production, or you can use bits and pieces, but it's not replacing your job yet. And the fact that until it's connected to the internet, it's still going to be extremely limited, especially with the memory limits we have now. And then the last one that I use it for all the time, and that's pretty basic, but I think people should use that, is to write what I call small copy. So that would be like title tags, meta tags, subject lines, social media posts, summaries of things, etc. Like all the little writing you need to do all the time. For this, it's like I use AI for everything now. So like I put an example here where I pasted my last blog post. This example is interesting because you'll see how it doesn't do what you want sometimes. Because I said, write a meta description of maximum 155 characters for this article. Write in a way that makes the user wants to click and maybe teases them a bit. Space counts as character. I had to say that as well because otherwise it gave me too long stuff. And so it did. And then if you look at the result at the end, it was about this CNET thing. It's way more than 155 characters. Like CNET, a large tech publication owned by Red Ventures, etc. So it does that when it doesn't actually catch your comment. What it did is actually it summarized it. It made a summary. And so I said, okay, focus more on the findings, make it 155 characters. And it still gave me something that wasn't 155 characters. It was 199 when I checked it. And eventually I just gave up. I was like, make it 25% shorter. And it just did. It did. Uncover if top medias are secretly using AI to generate content, learn about the AI versus human search traffic findings, and its impact on online publishing. And it's a decent meta description. So like sometimes it will not do exactly what you want. If you ask it to write a meta description, it doesn't know it should be this number of characters, for example. It doesn't really link the idea, etc. So you could legitimately ask the question, should I have just written the meta description instead of chatting with Chat GPT here, for example? And it would have gone faster. But for subject lines in emails, for example, it's pretty good actually. I have like a swipe file of like subject lines that I collect from like various email lists I'm subscribed to, and then I can just paste them in and be like, find me a subject line similar to what I pasted about this. And and it does it quite well, actually.
This is going to be really important, is to start building databases of, good subject lines, good outreach emails, these things, in order to have a bunch of data in order to train this on in future if you want to use it effectively.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you need so we use Notion for that. Like I'm just bookmarking a million things in there. But then when I need work done, I just go and copy paste everything that I've curated over time. And again, the information you curate and feed into ChatGPT or whatever AI you use, is going to be the key to the quality of the output you get, because you're setting a context. Right now, the data ChatGPT has been human curated. Like some people have checked that it's not bullshit, that it got in there. Therefore, its answers are decent. But if you were connecting it live to the internet with a moderation system, it would pick up all sorts of crazy stuff and start giving crazy answers. And that's why we have a huge problem right now of like, how do we mass moderate content for AI so that it doesn't go crazy? And that's I think a question that the folks at OpenAI, etc., are trying to answer, and I don't think it's going to be connected to the internet until we figure that out. And that's why, for example, Google doesn't have a ChatGPT right now, because it doesn't really does that curation. It just brings, it does a little bit, but it's a real problem, So, and you can't replace Google with a database that's not updated live. That would be worse. So that's pretty much it. Yeah. But I have a lot more notes on like making your own prompts, etc. Like being iterative. We talked about this. Be descriptive. Use variables. That is the important stuff. I just want to say a few things you should not use ChatGPT for. One, try to write full articles with a single prompt. Like a lot of people are doing this right now. It's not good content. And it's like for very basic things, maybe, but like for these very basic things, how long do you think it is until we just get the AA article directly in Google? Like for these so simple things that it can answer very reliably. It's not that useful. Like think about, imagine if all of a sudden everything was transformed into gold. Gold would be irrelevant. Nobody would want gold. And so, you know what I mean? It wouldn't matter that it was super valuable a day before. It wouldn't be like and so I don't think there's much value.
Are you talking about a sort of like extended featured snippet where longer answers or longer results?
So there is a search engine. Let me actually check my notes. But there is a search engine called Niva that just released AI in search. It's quite interesting. It basically makes an extended featured snippet. But what's interesting is as you hover over the words in the featured snippet, it will actually show you where it got the information from. And there's the link to the sources below. So it's kind of interesting. It's a first take on that. It doesn't mean search will look like this, but it's very unlikely it doesn't look like this at some point.
And therefore, Microsoft said Bing is going to include this in a few months' time, right?
Yeah, let's see when it's done. It's possible they could push it back if they're not happy with it or something.
They're one of the owners, essentially
investors. They're investing 10 billion.
Chat GPT.
Yeah, they are. But it's like, as I said, connecting AI to the internet poses a lot of challenges that I'm not sure they can solve by then. I could see it more in like Microsoft Words, in like all the Microsoft products as ChatGPT is right
Excel, now. You've been using it in Google Sheets, right? To write formula.
Good GPT-3, yeah, GPT-3, yeah. But in these products, I can see it work. In search, it's a challenge if you want live information. I guess it will just be used for like very evergreen stuff that doesn't change, etc. And then sure, you can use that. It's exactly what's happening. It's like a huge chunk of the world was just transformed to gold. Everyone's just running on this. Oh my god, so much gold! I'm just gonna get as much as I can. But really, gold is not really worth that much anymore when there's so much of it. It's only worth something because of the rarity of it. And so I don't think there's much value in doing this. You probably just putting a bunch of content that's not going to be worth very much in a while for your site. The second thing I would not do with ChatGPT is rely on any number of facts or stats that it gives you. It makes stuff up. It's funny, I was typing link building stats in it, and and it literally started just repeating the same stat with different numbers and making up the sources as well. Like I said, give me the source. It just makes up URLs and everything. So if you don't fact check and if you just post that on your site, especially with Google going after like EAT and actual trustable information, etc., you're just red flagging your site, I think, and it's dangerous. And also, the third thing I wanted to say is, please do not stop building your sites because you think AI is going to take over, it's all going to be over, and the websites are not worth it anymore. For all the limitations I've just mentioned before, actual human edited content, someone who's, you can use AI as a tool, but fact checking it, making sure it's actual quality, adding experience to it, adding all of that is not going to be replaced by AI for a long time. And that's the real goal. The goal is like, what can I produce that AI cannot? And if you can do that, then that's the goal that you should be holding on to. And the goal is in humans right now, because AI is a dime a dozen at this point. And so yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but I would say AI content is just going to become a commodity like many other things, basically. Okay, that was kind of my final words of wisdom. I have a few resources I want to quote out. Aleda Solis made like a Chat GPT for SEO blog post that's pretty good. And there's a Chrome extension for Chat GPT for SEO called AIPRM for SEO. And there's 2 videos that are really good that I liked as well, which is actually, you'll be surprised, but I loved the video from Income School. I think it was really good. Ricky's take on it was a bit similar to mine, but also a bit different. But like, I agree with him a lot. It's like, he basically says like, it's not the end of like, same thing as I said, like human touch will be still important, etc. And Matt Diggity has a bunch of cool uses for ChatGPT as well on his video, so check it out if you want. And that's pretty much it. Any final question or like words of wisdom or something?
Yeah, so just talking about that like initial hype, are we still in that kind of everything's about to change, or have people kind of already started to be a bit more realistic about what's going on here? It almost reminds me a little bit of, remember a few years ago when everyone stopped working on their sites to become crypto investors, and then sort of came back.
Crypto investor meaning I put my money and I just hit F5 to just watch it go up,
basically,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. I mean, AI is a disruptive technology. It will change the way we create content. We need to learn how to create content with it. You got a little bit of bits and pieces of that today, but there's no doubt it's going to keep evolving, and we need more time to kind of like develop something a bit more solid. And when we will, it's going to be included in our training, and we'll add that on Authority Hacker for sure. We're not anti-AI. Google is not anti-AI. They said that they don't care how you make your content, just make it good. Think of AI content like the one press button as the lowest level of acceptable content today. And the lowest level of content just doesn't get that much traffic right now. It's just, you're going to have to find ways to build up on top of that, be better. And there's many ways to do that. And I'm not too worried. If anything, I'm actually quite excited to see a lot of competitors just steering away and doing shit content. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's finish it here. So thank you guys for listening. We have over 300 other episodes on the podcast. If you want to listen to them, go on authorityhacker.com/podcast. You'll find all the episodes, the notes and everything. If you want to subscribe to our newsletter so you can get the podcast, the blog posts, and anything else that we do, go on authorityhacker.com/subscribe.
By the way,
also have
some of the sort of like first observations and first things you discovered about AI are actually released via that newsletter every week or so. So you can often get kind of real first access to some of the new discoveries we're making if you subscribe there.
Yep, and there's also a free training if you want to start an authority site, niche site, etc. Because trust me, they're not dead even after AI, and they still do fine provided you actually add value to your content. And you can get that training on authorityhackertraining.com. So in 2 weeks, I'll be doing an interview with Skyrocket, and we'll be mixing AI with EAT, because EEAT now, because I think these topics are very much intertwined, even though they don't sound like they're intertwined. I'll also make sure that these are not the same. This is not the same interview that he's done with other podcasts, because I've seen him on other podcasts. So I'll make sure I'll ask him some stuff that's different and that builds up on what he said before. And also, I'd like to include your questions in there. So drop us a question on the YouTube comments if you want me to ask it to Karuf, and I'll pick the best questions and I'll ask him as well as part of the podcast. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.